The worst mistake powerful men make is believing humiliation disappears after the room stops laughing. The champagne flute trembled slightly in my hand as I stepped between tables draped in white silk and gold candlelight. Manhattan's wealthiest people moved through the ballroom like they belonged to another species entirely. Diamonds flashed beneath crystal chandeliers. Politicians smiled at men they secretly hated. Women in couture gowns laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. And somewhere above all of it, hidden behind the polished elegance and million-dollar smiles, power shifted hands and whispers no ordinary person was supposed to hear. I kept my eyes lowered. That was the rule at events like this. Blend in. Serve drinks. Don't become memorable. The black heels pinched my feet after 9 straight hours on shift, but I ignored it, balancing the silver tray carefully as I moved past a group of hedge fund executives discussing a real estate acquisition in the Hamptons like they were talking about the weather. My white uniform was simple compared to the glamour surrounding me, but I had pressed every wrinkle out of it before coming here tonight. Appearance mattered when people were looking for reasons to dismiss you. Claire. My manager's sharp whisper cut through the orchestra music. VIP table. Now. I turned toward the center of the ballroom. That was where he sat. Damien Moretti. Even before I knew his name, I felt the shift in the room around him. Men twice his age lowered their voices when he looked their way. Security hovered nearby without seeming obvious about it. Every movement he made carried the effortless confidence of someone accustomed to being obeyed immediately. He wore a black tuxedo tailored perfectly across broad shoulders. Dark hair swept back neatly, steel blue eyes cold enough to stop conversations mid-sentence. 34 years old, rumored billionaire, owner of half the private shipping routes on the East Coast. And according to every whisper floating through Manhattan society, one of the most dangerous men in New York. I approached carefully with the tray balanced against my fingertips. Fresh champagne, sir? His eyes lifted toward me lazily at first, distracted, uninterested. Then they narrowed. Something changed in his expression instantly. Not attraction, recognition, suspicion. The men seated around him fell silent. Damien stood slowly from his chair, towering over me by at least half a foot. Where did you get that? He asked quietly. My pulse stumbled. Excuse me. His gaze locked onto the silver bracelet around my wrist. My mother's bracelet. Thin platinum with a tiny emerald clasp. That bracelet, he said colder this time. Where did you steal it from? Heat rushed into my face so quickly it hurt. Around us, conversations began fading one by one as nearby guests sensed drama unfolding. I swallowed carefully. I didn't steal anything. A humorless smile touched his mouth. Women who sneak into events like this usually do. My fingers tightened around the tray. I work here. That's not what I asked. The ballroom felt suddenly too warm, too bright. Every eye nearby drifted toward us now, pretending not to stare while absolutely staring. I could feel it. The judgment. The anticipation. Damien stepped closer, voice low enough that only people nearest us could hear. Do you know how many people try attaching themselves to my world every year? I forced myself to hold his gaze despite the humiliation burning beneath my skin. I don't care about your world. A few people inhaled sharply. Wrong answer. His expression hardened instantly. Then, before I could react, his hand brushed against the bottom of the tray. The champagne glass tipped. Red liquid splashed across the front of my white uniform like spilled blood. Gasps echoed softly around the ballroom. Silence followed immediately after. Damien looked down at the stain without emotion. That dress probably costs more than your monthly rent, he said calmly. Be more careful. My throat tightened painfully. Every instinct told me to apologize, to shrink, to survive the moment quietly. But something colder settled inside me instead. I set the tray down carefully on the nearest table before looking back up at him. One day, I said softly, my voice steadier than I felt. You're going to regret speaking to me like this. For the first time all night, Damien Moretti looked genuinely surprised. The cold night air outside the ballroom hit my skin like ice water, but it still felt better than standing inside that room another second. Rain had started falling over Manhattan again, soft at first, turning the streets beyond the hotel entrance into streaks of gold and silver beneath passing headlights. I wrapped my thin coat tighter around myself as I stepped away from the flashing cameras near the entrance. Nobody stopped me. Nobody cared enough to. To them, I was just another embarrassed waitress who had learned the hard way that powerful men enjoyed reminding people where they belonged. But my hands would not stop shaking. Not because of the ruined uniform. Not because of the humiliation. Because for one terrifying second back there, when Damian Moretti looked at my bracelet, it felt like he recognized it. Like he knew exactly what it meant. I reached the corner of Lexington Avenue before finally stopping beneath the awning of a closed coffee shop. The rain tapped softly against the fabric overhead while taxis splashed through puddles nearby. My reflection stared back at me from the dark window glass. Red wine stained the front of my white blouse in uneven streaks. My mascara had smudged slightly beneath one eye from the rain. I looked exhausted. Small. Ordinary. Exactly the way I had wanted the world to see me for the past 3 years. My phone buzzed inside my purse. Evelyn. Of course, she had already heard. "Tell me you are home," my older sister said the second I answered. Her voice carried the calm sharpness of someone used to fixing disasters before they spread. "Not yet, Claire." Silence stretched between us for a moment before she sighed quietly. "The videos are already online." My stomach dropped. "What videos?" "Guests recorded the confrontation. Damian humiliating you is currently circulating through half of Manhattan." I closed my eyes. Somewhere across the street, a black SUV rolled slowly past before disappearing into traffic again. "Wonderful," I whispered. "Mother knows too." That made my chest tighten more than anything else tonight. Eleanor Bennett did not embarrass easily. Federal judge. Former prosecutor. The kind of woman senators stood for when she entered a room. "What did she say?" "Nothing," Evelyn answered carefully. "Which honestly worries me more." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "I am fine, Evie." "No, you are angry." She paused. "And honestly, you should be." Rain intensified around the city, drumming harder against the awning overhead. I watched people hurry down the sidewalk in expensive coats, heads lowered against the storm. Nobody noticed the girl standing alone in stained white fabric, trying very hard not to cry in public. "He thought I was after his money," I said softly. "That says more about him than you." "Maybe." But the look in Damian's eyes before I left kept replaying inside my head. Cold. Controlled. Yet underneath it, something else flickered the second I warned him he would regret it. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Another black SUV slowed, near the curb this time. Tinted windows. Expensive. Familiar. My pulse stumbled. The passenger window lowered halfway. One of Damian's security men sat inside wearing a dark suit and an expression carved from stone. "Miss Bennett." Every muscle in my body tensed immediately. "What?" "Mr. Moretti wishes to speak with you." I stared at him through the rain. Then Mr. Moretti should learn how to apologize first. The guard remained perfectly calm. "Miss Bennett, I strongly suggest you come with us." Lightning flashed faintly across the clouds overhead. Somewhere deep in my chest, instinct whispered that tonight was no longer about a ruined dress or public embarrassment. Something had shifted the moment Damian Moretti saw that bracelet. And whatever game powerful people were playing around me suddenly felt much larger than I understood. Every survival instinct I had told me not to get into that SUV. Manhattan rain blurred the city into streaks of silver outside the tinted windows, while the engine idled quietly beside the curb. The guard waited without emotion, one hand resting near the door handle like he already knew I would eventually say yes. I tightened my grip on my phone instead. "No," the single word came out sharper than I expected. "I am not going anywhere with him." The guard studied me for a second before speaking into the small earpiece hidden beneath his collar. He listened silently, then looked back at me. "Mr. Moretti insists." A bitter laugh escaped me. That seems to be a habit of his. I turned away before he could answer and stepped back into the rain. Cold water soaked through my coat instantly as I crossed the street toward the subway entrance. My pulse still raced hard beneath my ribs, but anger was beginning to overpower humiliation now. Damian Moretti thought money solved everything. Thought power gave him the right to summon people whenever he pleased. The worst part was that most people probably obeyed him immediately. I descended the wet subway stairs 2 at a time, ignoring the ache in my feet. Downtown trains screeched through the tunnel below while exhausted commuters crowded the platform beneath flickering fluorescent lights. Nobody here cared about billionaire galas or viral videos. A woman in hospital scrubs leaned against the wall drinking coffee from a paper cup. A teenager in headphones slept sitting upright on a bench. Ordinary people surviving ordinary lives. It grounded me enough to breathe again. My phone buzzed once more. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Almost. What? Silence greeted me for half a second before his voice filled the line. Deep. Calm. Controlled. You should not have walked away alone tonight. I froze immediately. Damien Moretti. Even through a phone speaker, his voice carried that same unsettling authority. And you should not publicly humiliate women at charity events, I shot back. Around me, the subway platform roared with arriving trains, but somehow his silence still felt louder. I owe you an apology. The word surprised me enough that I forgot to move for a second. That was fast. I do not enjoy being wrong. No, I whispered bitterly. You just enjoy making sure everyone else feels small. Another pause. Longer this time. Somewhere behind him, I could faintly hear rain against glass and the distant murmur of male voices. Who gave you that bracelet? He asked quietly. There it was again. Not curiosity. Obsession. My fingers instinctively touched the platinum band around my wrist. Why do you care? Answer the question, Claire. Hearing my first name in his voice sent an uncomfortable chill through me. You do not get to interrogate me after what you did. You are in danger. I nearly laughed out loud right there on the subway platform. From who? Embarrassed rich people. From men who recognize symbols before they recognize faces. My stomach tightened unexpectedly. What does that mean? But before he could answer, movement at the top of the subway stairs caught my attention. Two men in dark coats had entered the station. Not unusual in Manhattan. Except both of them scanned the crowd too carefully. Too deliberately. One of them looked directly at me. Instinct hit hard and immediate. Wrong. Something was wrong. Damien's voice sharpened instantly through the phone. Claire. I lowered my voice. There are two men down here. Describe them. Tall. Dark coats. One has a scar near his chin. Silence. Then I heard Damien stand abruptly on the other end of the call. Leave the station now. What? Now. The urgency in his voice erased every trace of arrogance from earlier tonight. Suddenly, he did not sound like a man protecting his ego anymore. He sounded like someone genuinely afraid something terrible was about to happen. My heart slammed against my ribs as I turned toward the opposite end of the subway platform. The two men were moving faster now, weaving through commuters with the kind of focus that made my skin crawl. One of them spoke quietly into his phone while keeping his eyes locked on me. Claire. Damien's voice cut sharply through the speaker again. Listen carefully. I swallowed hard. Who are they? People who should not know you exist. The arriving train screamed into the station behind me, wind rushing violently through the tunnel as doors slid open. Crowds surged forward immediately, exhausted New Yorkers pushing past each other beneath flickering lights. For one desperate second, I considered disappearing into the train and pretending none of this was happening. Pretending Damien Moretti and his dangerous world had never touched mine at all. Then I saw the man with the scar point directly at me. Fear hit cold and immediate. Real fear. Not humiliation. Not anger. Survival fear. Claire. Damien said again, quieter this time. Get above ground. My driver is waiting outside the north entrance. I am not getting into another one of your cars. You are if you want to stay safe tonight. The train doors began closing. People cursed and hurried forward around me while the two men started moving faster. Instinct finally overpowered pride. I turned and ran toward the stairs. My heels slipped slightly against wet concrete as I pushed through the crowd, pulse roaring in my ears louder than the station itself. Somewhere behind me, footsteps followed. Not running. Controlled. Certain. I reached street level breathless, cold rain immediately soaking my hair again. Manhattan traffic blurred beneath glowing streetlights while horns echoed through the wet streets. A black SUV waited exactly where Damien said it would. Driver's side door already open. Miss Bennett, the older driver said urgently. Please. I hesitated for half a second too long. The two men emerged from the subway entrance behind me. One of them scanned the street immediately before spotting me beside the SUV. The look that crossed his face made my blood run cold. Recognition. The driver did not wait anymore. He gently but firmly opened the back door wider. Now, this time I got inside. The locks clicked instantly as the SUV pulled away from the curb into heavy traffic. I pressed shaking fingers against my temple, trying to steady my breathing while rain streaked across the dark windows. The city outside suddenly felt unfamiliar. dangerous in ways I could not understand yet. My phone remained pressed against my ear. Damien exhaled slowly on the other end of the line, as if he had been holding his breath the entire time. Are you hurt? The question caught me off guard. No, silence. Then quieter. Good. I leaned back against the leather seat, exhausted anger returning now that immediate panic had faded slightly. You owe me answers. You will get them. Start with why strangers are following me because of a bracelet. Another pause. I could almost picture him deciding how much truth to reveal. That bracelet belonged to your father. My stomach tightened painfully. My father died when I was 11. Not the man who raised you. The words hit harder than the cold rain outside ever could. I froze completely. What? Traffic lights reflected across the ceiling of the SUV in shifting red and gold patterns while the city moved around us. For several seconds, I could not even breathe properly. Damien's voice remained calm, careful now instead of commanding. 3 years ago, several financial accounts tied to old East Coast crime families vanished overnight. Millions disappeared. Nobody ever found where the money went. What does that have to do with me? The symbol engraved inside your bracelet belongs to one of those families. My hand instinctively turned the bracelet over beneath the dim interior light. Tiny emerald clasp, platinum edges, and inside, nearly invisible unless someone knew where to look, a small crest I had never understood. My mother always refused to explain it. Suddenly, every secretive conversation from my childhood replayed differently in my mind. Every private school transfer, every security escort disguised as drivers, every warning about staying invisible. Who am I? I whispered before I could stop myself. For the first time since meeting Damien Moretti, his voice lost all traces of control when he answered. That, he said softly, is exactly why they are looking for you. The SUV crossed Midtown in complete silence except for the steady rhythm of rain against the windows and the distant hum of Manhattan traffic below. I sat frozen in the back seat, fingers curled tightly around the bracelet on my wrist, like touching it long enough might suddenly make my entire life make sense. But nothing made sense anymore. Not Damien's warning. Not the men following me. Not the look on my mother's face every time I asked questions about my childhood, and she changed the subject too quickly. Across from me, the city glowed through sheets of rain. Golden penthouse windows. Neon reflections sliding across wet pavement. New York looked beautiful from inside armored glass. Distant. Untouchable. I hated that part of me understood why powerful men like Damien Moretti became addicted to control. Miss Bennett. The driver's voice broke softly through the silence. We are here. I blinked, disoriented for a second before looking outside. The SUV had stopped beneath a private underground entrance guarded by steel gates and discreet security cameras hidden inside marble walls. A luxury residential tower rose above us into the storm clouds, all dark glass and white stone. The kind of building where apartments cost more than entire neighborhoods. Where are we? Mr. Moretti's residence. Of course. I almost laughed from exhaustion. Absolutely not. The driver hesitated carefully. Miss Bennett, with respect, remaining alone tonight would not be wise. And trusting Damien Moretti would be? The older man met my eyes briefly in the rearview mirror. I have worked for him 14 years. He paused. I have never heard fear in his voice before tonight. Something about the honesty in that answer unsettled me more than manipulation would have. Before I could respond, the rear passenger door opened from outside. Cold rain swept briefly into the SUV alongside the scent of expensive cologne and wet city air. Damien stepped inside, without speaking immediately. Black wool coat, rain glistening faintly against dark hair. Steel blue eyes unreadable beneath the dim overhead light. He looked less polished now than he had at the gala. Less untouchable, and somehow more dangerous because of it. The door shut behind him softly. Silence filled the space between us again. I folded my arms tightly. You humiliate me in public and now expect me to trust you enough to walk into your home. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. No, the answer surprised me. I expect you to hate me right now. Rain streaked slowly down the tinted windows beside him while Manhattan lights reflected across sharp features carved from shadow and exhaustion. But hatred will not protect you from people searching for that bracelet. I swallowed hard. Tell me the truth. Damien looked at my wrist for one long second before finally answering. Your biological father was connected to one of the oldest financial syndicates on the East Coast. Mafia. The word felt unreal leaving my mouth. He did not deny it. 26 years ago, several families collapsed after federal investigations exposed laundering operations tied to politicians and international accounts. Most of the people involved disappeared. Some died. Some changed identities. My chest tightened painfully. And my mother? Judge Eleanor Bennett was one of the prosecutors assigned to the case before she became a federal judge. The world tilted slightly. That is impossible. Your mother disappeared from public life for 11 months during that investigation. Damien's voice remained calm, almost gentle now. When she returned, she had a husband and a daughter. My breathing became uneven instantly. No, this could not be real. My entire childhood suddenly replayed differently inside my head. The private schools, security disguised as drivers, my mother refusing photographs near our home. The constant moving after anonymous threats she claimed were connected to old court cases. You are lying, I whispered, but the words sounded weak even to me. Damien held my gaze steadily. I wish I was. Silence swallowed the SUV completely after that. Outside, thunder rolled faintly across the city while rain battered the glass harder now. For the first time in years, I realized something terrifying. My life had not been normal before tonight. I had just been protected from the truth. The elevator ride to Damien Moretti's penthouse felt unreal. Soft instrumental music played quietly through hidden speakers while the city rose higher and higher beneath us. Manhattan lights glittering through rain-covered glass like a second sky turned upside down. I stood near the back corner of the private elevator with my arms wrapped tightly around myself, trying to process everything he had told me inside the SUV. Biological father. Syndicate. Hidden identity. The words repeated in my head without fully settling into reality. Across from me, Damien remained silent. One hand rested loosely inside the pocket of his dark coat, while the other adjusted the cuff of his sleeve with controlled precision. Every movement about him felt deliberate, trained, like even stillness required discipline. The elevator finally opened directly into the penthouse. Warm golden light spilled across polished marble floors and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rain-soaked skyline. The apartment was massive without feeling crowded. Modern furniture in dark colors. Shelves lined with expensive books. A grand piano near the glass wall facing Central Park. Everything elegant. Controlled. Cold. Yet strangely quiet for a man rumored to command half the city through fear alone. Damien removed his coat slowly before turning toward me. You can stay here tonight. I let out a tired laugh. You really think that is comforting? His expression tightened briefly. No. He walked toward the kitchen area, pouring a glass of water before offering it to me carefully, almost cautiously. But it is safer than anywhere else right now. I accepted the glass mostly because my hands would not stop trembling. You keep saying that. My voice came out softer than I intended. Safer from who? Damien leaned both hands against the marble counter for a second, staring down at the dark surface as though deciding how much truth I could handle. The men who followed you tonight work for Viktor Sokolov. The name meant nothing to me. Who is that? Someone who believes your father stole something valuable before he disappeared. My stomach twisted immediately. My father is dead. Damien finally looked up at me again. That depends which one you mean. Silence hit hard between us after that. Rain rolled against the massive windows behind him while thunder echoed faintly over the city. I hated how calm he remained while my entire life collapsed into questions I could not answer. Why are you helping me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. His jaw flexed slightly. Because I made a mistake tonight. Humiliating me in public qualifies as more than a mistake. I know. There was no arrogance in his voice now. No sarcasm. Just exhaustion. And somehow that unsettled me more than anger would have. I stared down at the wine stain still visible across my blouse. It had dried slightly now, leaving dark crimson streaks against white fabric. Damien followed my gaze immediately. Regret flashed briefly across his face before disappearing behind control again. I thought you were someone else, he admitted quietly. Someone trying to get close to me through that bracelet. So you decided embarrassing me in front of hundreds of people was reasonable? No, another pause. It was cruel. The honesty caught me completely off guard. Powerful men rarely admitted cruelty, especially men like Damien Moretti. For several seconds, Neither of us spoke. The city hummed below us through rain and distant traffic, while tension stretched carefully between us like thin glass ready to crack. Finally, I set the untouched water glass down beside me. I want to call my mother. Something unreadable crossed Damien's eyes instantly. Claire. No, I shook my head firmly. If my entire life has been built on lies, then I deserve answers from her directly. Damien looked toward the storm outside for a long moment before answering. You can call her. Relief barely had time to settle before he added quietly. But she will already know where you are. A chill crawled slowly down my spine. What does that mean? Damien reached into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out his phone. Then he turned the screen toward me. A news article filled the display. My breath stopped instantly. Grainy gala footage showed Damien standing inches from me beside the ruined champagne tray. But the headline underneath made my blood run cold. Federal Judge Eleanor Bennett's daughter seen with reclusive billionaire Damien Moretti at private Manhattan event. For a moment, I could not hear anything except the rain. The headline blurred slightly as my pulse pounded behind my eyes. Judge Eleanor Bennett's daughter. The words felt heavier now. Dangerous now. Not just because people suddenly knew who I was, but because they knew where I had been. With him. I slowly looked up from the phone screen toward Damien. How long has this been public? 23 minutes. My throat tightened instantly. 23 minutes, and already every news outlet in Manhattan knows. Damien locked his phone and set it face down against the marble counter. Nothing involving my name stays private for long. There was bitterness in his voice now. Quiet bitterness. The kind that sounded earned. I wrapped my arms around myself tighter as another wave of cold realization settled over me. My mother had spent years protecting our privacy. No interviews. No public family photos. Even charity events were carefully controlled. And tonight, because of one humiliating moment caught on camera, everything had exploded across the city. This cannot be happening. My voice barely sounded like mine anymore. Damien stepped closer slowly, careful enough not to corner me. Claire, do not. I shook my head hard. Do not stand there acting concerned after you caused this. His jaw tightened immediately. I know I caused it. You poured gasoline onto my life because you thought embarrassing a stranger would make you feel powerful. Silence. Sharp and heavy. Outside the penthouse windows, lightning flashed faintly over the skyline, illuminating rain-covered glass in silver streaks. Damien looked away first. You are right. The simple honesty behind those words disarmed my anger for half a second. Just long enough to confuse me. Men like Damien Moretti were not supposed to apologize. They were supposed to justify, deflect, control. But he just stood there absorbing every accusation without defending himself once. That somehow felt worse. My phone suddenly rang in my hand. Mother. The name on the screen made my stomach twist instantly. Damien noticed my expression and went completely still. Answer it, he said quietly. I stared at the phone for 2 full seconds before finally pressing accept. Claire. My mother's voice came calm and composed as always, but beneath it I heard tension stretched dangerously thin. Are you safe? I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because suddenly that question felt impossible to answer. Did you know? Silence met me immediately. Not confusion. Not denial. Silence. My chest tightened painfully. Mom. Her exhale came softly through the speaker. Where are you right now? With Damien Moretti. Another silence. Longer this time. Then, very carefully, put him on the phone. I looked toward Damien automatically. He already understood. Of course he did. Men like him probably survived by reading rooms before words were even spoken. I handed him the phone slowly. Damien accepted it with controlled calm, though something in his expression darkened instantly. Judge Bennett. His voice turned colder now. Professional. Dangerous. I could not hear my mother's response clearly, only fragments through the speaker, but Damien's eyes sharpened more with every second. No, he said flatly. She stays here tonight. My pulse stumbled. Because Victor's people already made contact. The room suddenly felt smaller. Colder. Damien listened again before his jaw flexed sharply. Then you should have told her the truth years ago. Silence. Another lightning flash illuminated the penthouse windows. I stood frozen beside the marble counter, while 2 worlds I never knew were connected collided around me in real time. Finally, Damien ended the call and handed the phone back carefully. What did she say? His eyes held mine for one long second before answering. Your mother is on her way here. Fear flickered through me instantly. Why does that sound bad? Damien glanced toward the storm outside. Because Eleanor Bennett does not visit anyone after midnight unless something has gone very wrong. Almost as if summoned by the words themselves, the penthouse security system chimed softly near the entrance. Damien's expression hardened immediately. Then the doorman's voice echoed through the speaker overhead. Mr. Moretti. A pause. Judge Bennett has arrived. And she is not alone. The penthouse doors opened less than 60 seconds later. I had seen my mother command federal courtrooms filled with powerful men since I was a child. I had watched senators lower their voices around her. Reporters feared her questions during public hearings more than most prosecutors feared losing cases. But nothing prepared me for the expression on Eleanor Bennett's face when she stepped into Damien Moretti's penthouse that night. Fear. Real fear. Rain glistened across the shoulders of her charcoal coat, while strands of dark blonde hair clung slightly damp against her temples. She looked elegant as always, composed as always, except for the tension in her eyes the moment they landed on me standing beside Damien. Behind her stood two federal security agents in dark suits, both scanning the penthouse immediately with sharp professional focus. My chest tightened instantly. Mom. She crossed the marble floor faster than I had ever seen her move in heels and cupped my face between cold hands like she needed physical proof I was unharmed. Are you all right? I nodded automatically, even though nothing about tonight felt all right anymore. She exhaled shakily before pulling me into a quick embrace. My mother rarely hugged anyone. That alone terrified me. When she stepped back, her attention shifted toward Damien immediately. The warmth vanished from her expression completely. You should have called me the second she appeared at that gala. Damien's voice remained calm. I did not know who she was until it was already public. That excuse would matter more if you had not humiliated her in front of half of Manhattan first. Silence cut sharply through the penthouse. Damien accepted the accusation without arguing. Again, I stared between them, confusion twisting tighter inside my chest with every second. Someone needs to explain what is happening. My voice sounded smaller than I intended. Now. My mother closed her eyes briefly like she had spent years dreading this exact moment. Outside the windows, thunder rolled softly above the city while rain streaked silver across the glass. Finally, she looked at me again. Your biological father was named Luca DeMarco. The name hit strangely. Familiar somehow. Like hearing part of a song remembered from childhood. He was not a criminal, she said quickly before I could speak. Despite what people believed, Damien remained completely still near the marble counter, watching both of us carefully. My mother continued quietly. Luca handled financial operations for several powerful families years ago, but eventually he discovered evidence connecting politicians, corporations, and organized crime through hidden international accounts. My pulse quickened immediately. The missing money. Damien gave a single nod. Luca intended to expose everything. My mother's expression darkened with old grief. People died trying to stop him. The room suddenly felt too quiet, too warm. What happened to him? My mother looked away first. That terrified me more than any answer could have. He disappeared before he could testify. Silence crashed down around us. Somewhere deep inside, part of me already understood the truth before she spoke it aloud. You think he was killed? Her eyes filled slightly for the first time all night. I think he sacrificed himself to keep you alive. I stopped breathing for a second. Damien looked toward the windows, jaw tightening sharply. My mother stepped closer again, voice softer now. After Luca vanished, people started searching for documents he supposedly hid before disappearing. Financial ledgers, account numbers, evidence capable of destroying powerful men. Her gaze dropped slowly toward the bracelet on my wrist. And they believed he left clues behind for you. My fingers instinctively covered the bracelet immediately. That bracelet belonged to Luca's mother, she whispered. You have worn it your entire life. My head spun violently. Every memory suddenly carried hidden meaning now. Every warning, every move, every locked door and private driver and whispered argument overheard after midnight. Why did you never tell me? My voice cracked painfully. My mother looked devastated for the first time in my entire life. Because I wanted you to grow up free from this world. Before I could answer, Damien's phone vibrated sharply against the marble counter. One glance at the screen changed his expression instantly. Cold. Dangerous. Controlled. He answered immediately. What happened? Silence filled the room while he listened. Then his eyes lifted slowly toward me. How many? Another pause. The temperature in the penthouse suddenly felt 10 degrees colder. Finally, Damien ended the call and looked directly at my mother. 3 federal storage locations connected to the DeMarco investigation were broken into tonight. My pulse stumbled hard. What does that mean? Damien's voice came low and steady now. It means someone believes Claire finally knows where Luca hid the evidence. The storm over Manhattan lasted until nearly dawn. Rain hammered against Damien Moretti's penthouse windows while the city below disappeared beneath fog and flashing emergency lights. Nobody slept. Federal agents moved quietly through private hallways speaking into earpieces. Damien took phone calls near the windows in low, controlled tones that somehow sounded more dangerous than shouting ever could. And I sat curled into the corner of a leather sofa, trying to understand how one night had completely destroyed the life I thought I knew. My mother remained beside me for hours after the call about the break-ins. Calm on the surface, but every now and then, when she thought I was not looking, fear slipped through the cracks in her expression. I had never seen Eleanor Bennett afraid before. That terrified me more than anything else. Around 4 in the morning, the storm finally began to weaken. Manhattan's skyline slowly reappeared through silver mist outside the glass, while pale blue morning light crept across the penthouse. Damien stood near the windows with his tie loosened slightly now, exhaustion visible beneath sharp features that had remained controlled all night. For the first time since meeting him, he looked human instead of untouchable. The storage locations were empty, he said quietly. My mother looked up immediately. What? Damien slipped his phone into his pocket. Whoever broke in did not find the evidence. Relief flickered briefly across her face before fading again. Then they will keep looking. Silence settled heavily across the room. I stared down at the bracelet around my wrist, tracing the tiny emerald clasp with trembling fingers. All night long people had talked about me like I was a key to some locked secret buried decades ago. A daughter, an heir, a clue. Nobody had asked what it felt like to suddenly realize your entire identity had been built around protection from a war you never knew existed. Claire, my mother's voice softened carefully beside me. I never wanted this world to touch you. I looked at her slowly. But it already has. Across the room, Damien's gaze lifted toward mine instantly. There was no arrogance left in his expression now. No cold amusement. Just regret, so heavy it almost seemed physical. He stepped closer carefully, like he understood trust had become something fragile around him. You should leave New York for a while, he said quietly. I almost laughed from exhaustion. And go where? Somewhere these people cannot reach you. People like you mean? The words landed harder than I intended. Damien absorbed them without flinching. Yes. Silence followed immediately after. He did not defend himself, did not pretend innocence. He simply stood there carrying the weight of every terrible assumption I had made about him earlier that night, and somehow proving most of them true. But not all of them. That was the dangerous part. Because beneath the power and fear surrounding Damien Moretti, I had also seen something else over the past few hours. A man trying desperately to fix damage he could not undo. A man who looked at me now like regret was slowly hollowing him out from the inside. Morning sunlight finally broke through the storm clouds then, pale gold spilling across the penthouse windows and marble floors. New York looked quieter after rain. Softer somehow. My mother stood slowly, exhaustion lining her face. Federal protection can move you somewhere secure by this afternoon. I should have agreed immediately. Instead, my eyes drifted toward Damien one last time. Toward the man who humiliated me publicly only hours ago. The same man now standing awake after an entire night spent trying to protect me from dangers I never knew existed. Our eyes met across the room. Something shifted quietly between us then. Not forgiveness. Not trust. Just understanding. The kind born from finally seeing the truth beneath someone's worst mistake. Damien spoke first, voice rougher than before. I cannot change what I did to you tonight. I swallowed hard but said nothing. His gaze lowered briefly toward the dried wine stains still visible across my white blouse before lifting back to mine. But I will spend the rest of my life regretting it. The honesty in those words settled somewhere deep inside my chest before I could stop it. Outside, Manhattan continued waking beneath fading rain and silver morning light while somewhere far below us, traffic began moving through the city again. Normal life. Ordinary life. The kind I realized I could probably never return to completely. Because sometimes one terrible night changes more than your future. Sometimes it changes the story you were told about who you are. And sometimes the people you fear most end up becoming the only ones standing beside you when the truth finally arrives.